Let us have another observation, and this is related to freedom of speech. Now, the thing is that why people should have freedom of speech, right? This is very important because usually many times we also feel like that we do not require freedom of speech, or freedom of speech should not be granted to a lot of people because they say a lot of things which are unacceptable. But then there is something which is favorable to freedom of speech as well. The first point says that if we suppress an opinion, it may turn out to be true. To assume otherwise is to assume that we are infallible, which is not the case. Now, this is very, very true that truth also changes from time to time, right? And moreover, I have a truth or I know certain thing, but if somebody else is having a better opinion or they are closer to the truth, so maybe we need to accept it rather than continuing with our own truth, right? So we may need to change our beliefs and principles. So it is always good to listen to others. The second says that even if the opinion is false, it might still contain some truth. So given that it is unlikely even for a generally true account to be without fault, by listening to other account we get closer to the total truth. So this is also true. Like I have a truth and this is say partially a true statement or a true belief, but then people have certain false opinions, but there are certain points which can be picked in and our truth can become very closer to truth. So we need to take up those points as well, right? Because this is a mutual way of learning and mutual way of growing as well. The third point adds on to that. Even if the true account already is the total truth, it still has to be criticized or challenged, because only by defending an account against criticism or challenge we are able to understand the reason why it is true account instead of just accepting uncritically that it is. Now this is also true. We accept everything just like that many a times, because if it is related to belief or religion or some kind of faith and all, so we accept it just like that. But the question is that if we put to criticism, so we even clarify why our truth is the truth, right? We analyze and we come to know about the greatness of our truth as well. So irrespective of the fact that suppose somebody is telling you a wrong thing or not a right thing, so then also let them speak, let them say, because then you will come or you will have better reasons to accept your truth as well. Last, only by challenging an established truth can we keep the vital link between theory and action. People often get complacent otherwise, and this link is broken. Now, this is also very important, that why a truth is true, because this truth, this theory is applicable, right? So you need to always question and criticize so that you keep the link between the two things. Because if we move on and if we do not remember these things, that what is the reason that something is accepted and something is not accepted and how this is applied, so we will lose the link, right? And this is going to be very important, that we need to understand that there is a link between these two things and we need to keep that link alive, right? And if the link is broken, so we need to bring upon certain new factors or parameters in that. So that is the idea of freedom of speech. Now, what are the functions of the freedom of speech? The first one is that people participate, right? Now, this is an interesting and important thing, because in democracy, we want people to participate. We call our democracies as participatory functioning, right? So people need to participate in political say junctures or political ideas and political say arenas, and it ensures participation of people. The second one is that it will be the pursuit of political truth, because if you are questioning, so you are coming closer, because this is what we also discussed in a last slide as well, that the political truth is achieved only through participation, only through criticisms, only through discussion. So that is going to be always an important thing, that let people speak, let people come out with their ideas. There will be a lot of ideas which may not be acceptable, which will be of no use, but then there will be definitely a lot of them which are of a lot of use, and it is very much required for us. Third, the more people speak, the more you will see that how much the majority is with us, because participation ensures majority, right? Like if there is a political process which is going on and very few people participate, then irrespective of the fact that we believe in majority and we are a majoritarian form of government, we Democracy is a majoritarian form of government, but then you have not ensured majority because very few people participated in the political process. Rest all people have not participated. So the idea is to encourage people to participate because in that way you will ensure majority. It is also an important thing because if only few people have the right to speak, only few people have the right to express, then it will end up in tyranny, right? And it will enhance the level of corruption. So in order to keep a proper check on this tyranny and corruption, you need to allow criticism. Like self-criticism and constructive criticism are very much required to control both tyranny as well as corruption, and it helps a nation to grow, it helps the state also to function better, right? And last but not the least, it also enhances stability because if you have discussed, if you have deliberated, if you have brainstormed on a concept, a lot of ideas have come and then something was decided, though it may not be a unanimous decision, but still something was decided out of it, so it will provide more stability to something which was not discussed, or not deliberated upon, and you never know whether people will accept it or not, right? So this was the function of speech which was given by Smola. Now let us come to second observation. Freedom of speech in the broadest sense includes freedom of political opinion, freedom of religious belief and worship, and freedom to espouse secular views. However, of course, freedom of speech is often restricted according to the content of the speech. This is very important, very, very important, that your content of the speech can always be questioned. You have the freedom of speech and it is not an absolute freedom or absolute right, but then what is questioned? Not your freedom of speech, but the content of speech, right? For example, there is an ongoing debate about whether extremist views should be tolerated. This is especially true in the case of far-right movements and parties which preach racial intolerance, but it can also be used to silence political opponents. Thus, in 1988, the United Kingdom government passed a broadcasting ban on the Irish Republican political party, Sinn Féin, so as not to give it the oxygen of publicity. Try to understand countries, try to understand states. Our country also faces a lot of extremism, a lot of separatist movements and so on. So whether these people or these ideas should be given the right to express. This is also something which is questioned. From one side, you should be given the freedom of speech. From other side, it may provide the oxygen of publicity. Because the more these kind of opinions come, people tend to accept these things, or people tend to follow these things because they are more attractive by nature and so on. So I'm not also favoring whether there should be freedom of speech or there should not be freedom of speech, but what I'm saying is that there is another point of view which says that certain actions need to be criticized or need to be stopped or need to be censored then and there. This is the idea, and especially in United Kingdom they have done. In fact, in United Kingdom also there are separatism or voices against the government on certain things. The same is in our case as well, and those are certain things which are challenged, right? And those are certain things which are questioned, that whether extremism or whether there is a lot of religious and racial intolerance in the whole of this world, including ours. We also face a problem called casteism. We also face a lot of regionalistic things and so on. So given these things, whether the government should allow certain kind of speech, or whether the government should allow certain kind of informations to be circulated is a questionable thing, right? So that becomes again a reason for tussle. This is about the freedom of information. If you see, we have passed it in 2005 and United Kingdom has passed it in 2000, but it was available in Sweden since the 18th century, right? In 1766, Sweden has passed the Freedom of Information Act, that you can have information from the government about any government machinery and what they are doing and what they are not doing and so on. So this right to information is something which was not available mostly across the world, but a country like Sweden, a Scandinavian nation, passed it way back in 1766. 200 years later, in United States of America. It came. Then it was followed by Denmark, Norway, Netherlands, France, and so on. And last but not the least, in United Kingdom also came in 2000. So this was how Freedom of Information Acts came in the world, and a lot of other nations also have followed that. We also followed, and this is in India. This is the story in India. It was passed on 11th May 2005. It was replaced by the Freedom of Information Act of 2002. The Supreme Court of India, in several judgments prior to the enactment of both acts, interpreted Indian Constitution to read right to information as a fundamental right, and as embodied in the right to freedom of speech and expression, and also in the right to life. So these were certain observations which were made. Public information officer responsibility is to ensure that information requested is disclosed to the petitioner within 30 days or within 48 hours in case of information concerning the life or liberty of a person. So few states have also passed it before India as a union. In 1997 it was passed by Tamil Nadu, Goa also 1997, Rajasthan 2000, Karnataka, Delhi both 2000, and Delhi is 2001 and Maharashtra is 2002. So now you also know about RTI, and people can go and fetch certain information from the state regarding its machinery and so on. We are closing on the last part of the cases. Let me tell you a couple of stories. The first case is about Sister Teresa in Colombia. Sister Teresa was a nun, and she was teaching the peasants. Now in Colombia during those days, the peasants do not have the right to study, or they do not have the right to education. Now, you know that right to education has also become a fundamental right in our country, and it should be mandatorily provided to 6 to 14 years of kids, right? So those are done. But and in our country, anybody can can be educated. But during those days in Colombia, the peasants who were working in the fields were not allowed to be educated, because then they will talk about their rights and this and that. So Sister Teresa was teaching them, and this was known to the people over there. The state came to know later, so they issued this suffragios. It's like a fatwa, right? And what was it? It is understood as invitation to your own funeral, right? And then she was taken one morning out of her house, and she was killed very brutally. This shows that state is sometimes taking a lot of steps to maintain the status quo rather than developing as a nation, and things like these happen. This is another interesting story, and it's not even 100 years back. It's a story of Tennessee in USA, where John T. Scopes was teaching Darwin's theory to students, and during those days Darwin's theory was banned. Why it was banned? It was banned because it said that human beings evolved from apes. On the other hand, the traditional mentality says that human beings evolved from God. Like, the concept is we are children of God. So if you are saying that we came from apes, so this is disgusting. This is absolutely unacceptable, and therefore Darwin's theory was banned. But he was an educated guy, and he knew that there is absolutely no doubt about it, and there is no problem about it. So he was teaching the kids about Darwin's theory, and the trial is also called the monkey trial, right? And he was found guilty by the court and was fined $100. A very interesting movie is also made on this. In fact, there are two movies, I guess so. Inherit the Wind, which also shows and talks about the trial. And if you will see that movie, you will see the line of argumentation, that how people are having certain ideas, and because of that they cannot see the truth, rather than they believe in certain kind of phantoms and certain kind of utopia, or some kind of things which has been told to them in some way or the other at some point of the time or the other. right? So these two are basically very sad stories about censorship, but then it is censorship, and you must be now understanding that education in itself is a very censored thing, right? Because we may not be able to be educated in some other way, right? There are a lot of ways in which you can be educated, but you are provided with some state courses, the state approved courses, and we only learn those things. We do not even have an idea that there are certain other things also which we can know about this world, right? So this is about it. Let us finish this discussion with two argumentation forms, what we call as the moralist and the causalist point of views. Now, the moralist and the causalist point of views for censorship and against censorship, pro censorship and against censorship, are as follows. Look, the moralist, if they are accepting censorship, right? So what they say is that the material or act should be censored because it is offensive to some, right? Because they accept censorship. But on the other hand, and taking the same line of argumentation from the moralist, if people are anti-censorship, that means people do not accept censorship, this will be more like state's view, and this will be more like the individual's view. Sorry. So the individual view will be that censorship is wrong because it is the denial of the right to basic right of freedom of speech, free speech, right? So this is the idea, because if you see, the moralist is basically a deontological principle, right? It is more like a thing in itself, right? So they are saying that censorship is wrong because it is a denial of the freedom, basic right to free speech, right? Now, if you take the causalist point of view, now this is a utilitarian point of view, right? It talks about the cause and effect relationship. So if you are pro censorship, that means if you are the state, this is state, this is individual, right? And this is deontology, and this is utilitarianism. So they will say the material or act should be censored because it is likely to incite people to behave in antisocial way. So they talk about the effect of it, right? That it may be inciting people to end up in violence or do certain kind of acts and this and that. Like a lot of things are said and done against censorship, and or say in favor of censorship by a lot of people. So one of the point of views is like this. The other point of view is that censorship is wrong because it denies people the opportunity to encounter different views and thus impedes innovation. So they talk in terms of like, if you are doing censorship, or if the state is censoring the things, then what is happening is that you are not getting enough of information, enough of ideas to go for certain kind of innovations, right? Because look, try to understand, you need to innovate as well. You need to know things as well, and for that you should not have been closed in a bottle, right? You should have unfettered freedom, unfettered access to information, so that you can get the best, or you can create the best out of it. But if you are not having the information to work out, then what you will do? So that is the whole idea. But then these are two different point of views, and whether you are a moralist or a causalist does not matter. You can still be in favor of censorship or against censorship, right? So these were certain things which I wanted to bring to your attention. In the next part of the lecture, what we will do is that we will see few more concepts related to censorship, and there is one very big debate these days which is going on regarding pornography. So we will be also discussing about that in the next lecture. Thank you.